The mansion had no name anymore. The road that once led to it had been swallowed by weeds, and the iron gate lay face down in the dirt like a fallen gravestone. Locals called it the Hog House, though no one alive could explain why. Teenagers who trespassed never stayed long. Hunters avoided the land. Even animals moved through it quickly, heads low, as if the soil itself whispered warnings. In the fall of 2009, when a real estate company bought the property for demolition, the first man inside lasted 12 minutes. He came out pale, shaking, insisting the basement smelled like slaughter, old blood and rot, thick enough to taste. They laughed at him. Old houses always smelled bad. He quit before lunch. It was only after the crew broke through the collapsed cellar wall that the truth began to surface. Behind bricks sealed with lime and clay lay a room that wasn't on any blueprint. Hooks lined the beams. A rusted meat cleaver rested on a table worn smooth by decades of use. And carved deep into the wood, over and over again, was the same sentence, scratched by different hands, at different times. He fed him to the hogs. The phrase meant nothing to the workers. But the land already remembered. Kentucky, 1821. Before the mansion rotted, before the gate fell, before history tried to forget, the estate belonged to a man named Thomas Kincaid. His wealth came from tobacco, hogs, and flesh, human flesh. He owned more than 70 enslaved men and women, and he was known throughout the county for two things: efficiency and cruelty. Kincaid didn't dirty his hands. That was the overseer's job. Elias Boone arrived one winter morning on a gray horse, carrying a ledger and a whip. He was younger than expected, sharp-eyed, clean-shaven, and smiling. Within a week, the smiles were gone. Boone believed fear worked better than chains. He believed pain was language. And he spoke it fluently. Among the enslaved was a man called Isaac. No one knew where Isaac came from. Some said Virginia, others said the Carolinas. Kincaid's records listed him only as male, strong, butcher-trained. That single word, butcher, kept Isaac alive. He worked the smokehouse, slaughtering hogs, salting meat, sharpening blades until they gleamed. He rarely spoke. When he did, it was soft, careful. His back was a map of scars. Boone noticed them immediately. Quiet ones break the hardest, Boone said once, watching Isaac work. Or they break you. Boone made Isaac his favorite target. Missed quota. Isaac was whipped. A hog escaped the pen. Isaac was blamed. Once, Boone accused him of stealing scraps and forced him to kneel in the mud while the hogs fed inches from his face. Boone laughed as the animals squealed and bit at the ground. Something changed in Isaac that day. The other enslaved noticed it not in his anger, but in his eyes. They had gone empty, not numb, focused, like a man counting steps to a destination he had already chosen. Boone's disappearance happened on a Thursday. He was seen last walking toward the smokehouse just before dusk, ledger under his arm. He planned to check meat stores and punish whoever he found lacking. That night, the hogs screamed longer than usual. No one slept. By morning, Boone was gone. Kincaid was furious. He ordered searches, interrogations, beatings. Dogs were brought in, but they circled the hog pens and refused to go closer. The smokehouse smelled stronger than ever, metallic, sweet, wrong. Isaac was missing too. The hogs, strangely, did not need feeding for days. When Boone's horse was found wandering near the creek, panic spread. Overseers didn't simply vanish. Men like Boone were protected by law, by guns, by silence. A message had been sent, whether anyone admitted it or not. Kincaid ordered the hogs slaughtered early. What they found inside the animals was never written down. Not officially, but the men who did the cutting vomited. One refused to speak ever again. Another drank himself to death before winter. Kincaid paid them extra and burned the remains himself. Isaac was never found. Instead, a story took root. They said the butcher knew where to cut, not just meat, but men. They said he worked through the night, calm as a priest, breaking Boone down piece by piece the way Boone had broken others. They said Isaac whispered to the hogs as they fed, promising them full bellies if they stayed quiet. They said Boone screamed until there was nothing left in him worth screaming. Officially, Boone ran away. Officially, Isaac was lost. And officially, the mansion stood clean. But at night, enslaved workers swore they heard hogs squealing long after they were gone. Swore the smokehouse light flickered with no fire. Swore a man stood in the doorway sometimes, holding a cleaver that never rusted, watching to make sure the truth stayed buried. Nearly 200 years later, when the demolition crew found the hidden room, the cleaver was still there. No blood, no bones, Just scratches in the wood. He fed him to the hogs. And beneath it, carved smaller, almost careful, as if added later. And the land remembered. The county sealed the mansion 2 days after the hidden room was discovered. No press release. No historical marker. Just yellow tape, a padlock on the gate, and a quiet instruction passed from one office to another: delay demolition. The official reason was structural instability. Unofficially, the men who'd been inside refused to return. At night, the neighbors noticed the lights. There was no electricity on the property, yet pale glows appeared in the smokehouse windows after sunset. Not bright, more like embers breathing. And sometimes, carried on the wind, came the sound of animals that were no longer there, hogs squealing, frantic and hungry. The sheriff said it was imagination. The land disagreed. In 1821, Kincaid did everything a man could do to bury a scandal. He rewrote records. He burned Boone's ledger. He sold half his enslaved workers south within the year, breaking families apart so no one could compare stories. The smokehouse was sealed, bricked over and listed as collapsed. A new one was built farther from the main house, cleaner, brighter. But wealth began to rot. Hogs sickened without cause. Crops failed in perfect rows, as if something beneath the soil had traced lines of death upward. Kincaid's wife stopped sleeping, insisting she heard chopping sounds beneath the floorboards, slow and patient, every night at the same hour Boone used to make his rounds. When Kincaid confronted the remaining enslaved, demanding answers, none spoke. Except one old woman. She told him the butcher had not fled. She said Isaac had finished his work. Kincaid struck her for it, hard enough to break bone. She died before dawn. That night, the hogs screamed until sunrise. Within 5 years, Kincaid was ruined. The estate passed hands again and again, never lasting more than a decade with any owner. Fires broke out without heat. Meat spoiled overnight. Animals refused to enter the pens. Overseers quit, claiming they felt watched near the old smokehouse, their skin crawling as if unseen fingers traced their backs. The mansion earned a new reputation. Not haunted, punishing. In 1893, a preacher bought the property cheap, convinced evil could be prayed away. He renamed it Redemption Hill and tore down the hog pens himself. During construction, workers uncovered bones beneath the mud, too many, too small, too clean. The preacher ordered them reburied. That Sunday, he preached forgiveness. That night, his throat was found slit with surgical precision, laid open the way hogs were dressed. No weapon was ever found. The smokehouse door stood open for the first time in 70 years. Redemption Hill was abandoned by winter. Back in 2009, the real estate company hired a historian to assess the site quietly. Her name was Margaret Hale. She specialized in problem properties, places where legend and land tangled too tightly to sell. She dismissed most ghost stories. Patterns interested her more, and this place had patterns. Owners punished the enslaved or the poor. They died violently. Owners who ignored the past. Ruined, but alive. Anyone who tried to erase the story entirely. Destroyed. Margaret found something else buried in the county archive, a mislabeled slave inventory from 1820. One entry had been scratched out so aggressively the paper thinned. Isaac. Next to it, written in different ink, much later. Butcher. Smokehouse. Unresolved. That word, unresolved, chilled her more than any ghost story. The night Margaret broke into the mansion alone, she didn't bring equipment. Just a notebook and a flashlight. She wanted to listen. The basement air was cold, heavy. The hidden room smelled faintly of iron, though tests had found nothing. The cleaver lay exactly where the workers left it. Margaret swore it was cleaner than before. When she touched the table, the wood was warm. Behind her, something shifted. Not a voice, not footsteps, breathing, slow, controlled, close enough to feel on her neck. She didn't turn around. She remembered the pattern. "You're not forgotten," she said quietly. "I'm not here to erase you." The breathing stopped. On the table, new scratches appeared in the wood, carving themselves letter by letter. Margaret watched, frozen, as the sentence completed. "I was never lost." The flashlight flickered, and for the first time in 2 centuries, the hogs screamed again, echoing not from outside, but from beneath the ground itself. Margaret ran. The next morning, she submitted her report. Recommendation: do not demolish. Do not restore. Do not disturb. 'Cause the land is still settling accounts. After the night in the mansion, she woke every morning at exactly the same hour, 3:17 a.m., with the smell of iron in her nose and the phantom sound of a blade being honed, slow and deliberate. She tried recording it once. The audio captured nothing but her breathing and a faint, rhythmic scraping that technicians later claimed was tape distortion. She knew better. So did the land. Isaac did not die in the smokehouse. That was the first truth Margaret uncovered when she stopped looking for records and started following absences. Runaway notices from surrounding counties listed men of similar height, similar scars, similar skills, but none ever named Isaac. Instead, strange reports surfaced. Overseers found butchered with professional precision, hog pens left spotless, bodies reduced to nothing but memory and rumor. In Tennessee, an overseer vanished near a slaughterhouse in 1824. The hogs were fed for weeks without explanation. In Missouri, 1831, a plantation owner was found hanging upside down in a curing shed, his blood fully drained, the floor scrubbed clean with ash and lye. In Louisiana, whispers spread of a quiet butcher, who appeared after punishments grew cruel, and disappeared once balances were settled. Always the same pattern, never witnesses, never mistakes. Isaac didn't haunt places, he corrected them. By the time slavery officially ended, the stories had shifted. They no longer spoke of an enslaved man, but of a figure. A presence, something that moved through unjust land the way fire moved through dry fields. Newly freed workers warned each other not to repeat the cruelty of masters. "Don't bring the butcher back," they said. Some laughed. They didn't laugh long. In 1872, a sharecropper named William Grady tried to recreate the old order. He chained workers at night, starved them, beat them openly. He bragged that the war had changed nothing, that fear still worked. On the third night, his hogs broke free. By dawn, only his boots were found, neatly placed outside the pen. Grady's wife claimed she saw a man standing among the hogs, tall, calm, sleeves rolled up, his hands clean. She went mad before the year ended. Margaret realized then what the mansion truly was. Not a prison, a marker, a place where the butcher began, and where he returned when the work elsewhere was done. The scratches on the walls weren't warnings. They were records. Each sentence carved into the wood marked a settled debt. Each layer of soot in the smokehouse ceiling told time better than any calendar. The mansion hadn't been abandoned because it was cursed. It had been abandoned because it was finished. Until someone tried to forget again. The county council met in private. They wanted the land gone. Investors were nervous. Too many rumors, too many delays. One councilman suggested burning it down. Another suggested pouring concrete over the cellar, sealing it forever. Margaret spoke once. "If you do that," she said, "you won't erase him. You'll invite him." They voted anyway. The fire started clean. Too clean. Flames moved against the wind, wrapping the mansion gently, almost lovingly. The smoke rose straight into the sky, black and thick, smelling not of wood, but of cooked meat. The smokehouse did not burn. It stood untouched while the rest collapsed inward, beams falling like kneeling men. When the fire died, the cellar was open to the sky. And in the center of the smokehouse floor, where no carving had been before, a new message waited. Fresh, deep, certain. You called me back. That night, hogs across 3 counties broke free from their pens. That night, 2 men with documented abuse complaints vanished. That night, Margaret dreamed of Isaac for the first time, not as a monster, not as a ghost, but as a man washing his hands in a creek, patient, tired, finished for now. He looked up at her in the dream and spoke for the first time. "Tell it right," he said, "or I will." Margaret woke with dirt under her fingernails and the taste of smoke in her mouth. By morning, she began to write. Not a report, a record. She didn't title it, didn't market it. She uploaded scanned records, eyewitness accounts, photographs of carvings, soil reports, timelines of disappearances that formed a line no statistician could ignore. At the end, she wrote only one sentence. "This is not a ghost story. It is a ledger." By sunrise, the file had been downloaded thousands of times. By nightfall, it had been flagged, removed, reposted, mirrored, and translated. Screenshots spread faster than takedowns. People recognized places, names, family histories that suddenly made sense. Comments appeared beneath the reposts, short and shaken. "My great-grandfather vanished in 1911. He ran a hog farm. He beat his workers. This happened near my town. We were told it was a fire. The carvings, my uncle photographed those exact words in the 80s. The story was remembering itself. And the land was listening. 3 days later, the first man died. He wasn't connected to the mansion. Not directly. He owned a private detention labor camp disguised as a rehabilitation farm. Complaints had been buried for years. Inspections delayed. Money had softened every edge. That night, the Hogs broke their fence. In the morning, the camp stood empty except for blood-clean mud and a message pressed into the earth with something heavy and deliberate. Settled. The sheriff called it an animal attack. Margaret didn't bother correcting him. The pattern accelerated. Men who profited from cruelty, quietly, legally, invisibly, began to disappear. Not all at once, not messily. Each vanished in a way that mirrored their sin. Those who starved others were found hollowed. Those who beat were broken. Those who sold bodies were reduced to inventory themselves. No witnesses, no mistakes, only hogs that refused to eat afterward. Farmers reported animals standing motionless for hours, eyes fixed on empty space, sides heaving as if they'd been made to remember something older than hunger. Margaret received the first letter a week later. No stamp, no return address, just butcher paper folded carefully. Inside, written in a steady hand, "You told it right." Her hands shook, but not with fear. With relief. The media tried to name it a cult, a serial killer, mass hysteria, viral fiction, anything but what it was. Experts argued statistics. Clergy demanded exorcisms. Politicians promised investigations that went nowhere. None of it slowed him. Because Isaac was not chasing attention. He was closing accounts. Margaret returned to the ruins at dusk. The smokehouse stood alone now, open to the sky, walls blackened but intact. The cleaver rested on the table again, though she was certain it had been taken as evidence. It gleamed softly, clean as bone. She spoke without turning. "They want me to stop." A presence filled the room, not heavy, not violent. Simply there, like a man waiting his turn. "They always do," Isaac said. His voice was calm, human, worn thin by time but not by regret. "You're killing them," she said. "I'm finishing them." She swallowed. "What happens when there's no one left?" A pause. Then I rest." The cleaver shifted slightly on the table, as if nudged by an unseen hand. "But you keep records now," he added. "That matters." That night, Margaret added a final chapter to the manuscript. She listed names, not accusations, not rumors, but documented cruelty buried by systems and signatures. She warned readers not to hunt, not to provoke, not to imitate. "This is not permission," she wrote. "This is remembrance." She ended with a choice. If you profit from suffering, stop. If you hide it, uncover it. If you try to erase it. She left the sentence unfinished. The next morning, it was completed for her. Carved into the charred beam of the smokehouse, deep enough to last another 2 centuries. "I will." It began quietly, the way corruption always does, not with screams, but with whispers. Online forums formed around Margaret's manuscript, then splintered into private groups. Some were harmless. Descendants comparing records, historians correcting timelines, people finally naming what had been done to their families. Others were not. They shared addresses. They shared rumors. They shared names that had not been proven, cruelty assumed rather than recorded. They spoke the butcher's name like a prayer and a threat, believing that if they spoke loudly enough, violently enough, he would come. They were wrong. The first to try was a man named Colton Reese. Reese had lost his job, his marriage, his sense of direction. He blamed a landlord who'd evicted him months earlier. Online, he wrote long posts about injustice, about blood debts, about how history justified what he planned to do next. He broke into the ruins at midnight, carrying a stolen cleaver and a list. "Do it," he whispered into the smokehouse. "I brought you work." The air went cold, not hostile, disappointed. When Reese was found the next morning, he was alive, but changed. His hands were shattered, fingers broken so precisely it looked surgical. Every bone that could grip, strike, or hold a blade had been ruined. Carved into the dirt beside him were 2 words. "Not yours." Reese never spoke again. Margaret shut the forums down as best she could, but stories don't obey moderators. Once something becomes symbol, people bend it to fit their hunger. Isaac did not bend. The deaths stopped as suddenly as they had begun. Men who deserved punishment lived on. Cruelty went unfinished. Survivors grew angry, at Margaret, at the story, at the silence that returned. Why did he stop? They demanded. Margaret knew the answer before she returned to the smokehouse. "You don't work for us," she said, standing in the doorway. "No," Isaac replied, He was clearer now, more defined, not flesh, not ghost, but memory given shape. I work against what I was made to serve. They're still hurting people, I know. Then why stop? Isaac looked at the table, at the cleaver, at his hands. Because they stopped listening, he said. They wanted blood without truth. Punishment without record. That's how this began the first time. Margaret felt the weight of it then. Justice that is rushed becomes cruelty wearing a mask. The land reacted, not with violence, but with warning. Hogs across the region refused to eat for days. Slaughterhouses shut down when blades snapped without force. Meat spoiled untouched. The economy around flesh, buying it, selling it, wasting it, stuttered. People laughed at first, then prices climbed, then panic crept in. Something was being withheld. Margaret published one last update. No names, no accusations, just instruction. If you want the reckoning to continue, she wrote, do what history refused to do. Document. Listen. Tell the truth without shaping it into a weapon. This is not vengeance. It is accounting. That night, she dreamed of Isaac again. This time, he stood farther away, already turning. I was a butcher, he said. Not a god. He paused, then added, almost gently. Don't make me one. The next morning, the cleaver was gone. The table was bare, and for the first time since 1821, the smokehouse smelled like nothing at all. No hogs screamed, no men vanished, no messages appeared in dirt or wood. The smokehouse stood empty, its doorway yawning open, waiting, or finished. People argued over what it meant. Some claimed the story had burned itself out. Others whispered that justice, once awakened, never truly sleeps. Margaret knew better. Justice rests when it is respected. The ledger began to grow. Not publicly, quietly. University archives received anonymous packets, copies of plantation records, letters, punishment logs never meant to survive. Churches opened forgotten basements and found boxes labeled only with dates. Families unearthed truths their elders had tried to bury out of shame or fear. The past surfaced without blood. Men resigned. Businesses dissolved. Old fortunes thinned as lawsuits crept in like rot. It wasn't dramatic. It was thorough, like careful cutting. Margaret watched it unfold from a distance, saying little. She had learned her role. She was not the voice of judgment. She was the keeper of memory. One autumn evening, she returned to the ruins for the last time. Grass had begun to reclaim the foundation. Vines climbed where walls once stood. The smokehouse remained, but even it was softening, wood graying, beams loosening their grip on the sky. Inside, the table was still bare. No more work, she asked the empty room. A presence stirred, not behind her, not before her, but everywhere at once. Not heavy, not cold, tired. There will always be work, Isaac said. But not for me. She felt a strange ache at that. You're leaving, I'm letting go. She thought of the stories, the fear, the legend that had grown larger than the man who began it. They'll forget again, she said. Isaac was quiet for a long time. Then someone else will remember, he said. It doesn't have to be a butcher. That night, the land changed. Not violently, gently. Farmers reported hogs birthing healthy litters after years of sickness. Soil tests showed nutrients returning to places long dead. Even the creek near the ruins ran clearer, as if something heavy had finally stepped out of it. The mansion site was never rebuilt. The county turned it into protected land, no signs, no plaques. Just trees and wind and a path worn by feet that came to stand quietly, feeling something they couldn't name. Children asked why no one built there. Adults said, it's finished. Margaret locked the ledger away. She didn't publish it, didn't monetize it, she donated it, sealed for 50 years, to be opened by people who would not know her name. Before she did, she added one last page. He was a man, she wrote. They made him a tool. History tried to make him a monster. He refused both. Remember that. Years later, long after Margaret was gone, a wildfire swept near the old land. Flames raced through the forest, devouring everything in their path. Everything except the smokehouse. When firefighters found it untouched at the center of ash, they discovered something new etched faintly into the wood, weathered, almost gone, but still readable. Balanced. And beneath it, so light it could only be seen at dawn. Years passed without incident, and that, more than anything, unsettled people. Disasters made sense. Hauntings could be argued with. But restraint, deliberate, measured silence, felt intentional in a way fear never had. The land remained untouched. No fences, no signs, just a narrow trail worn by those who felt drawn there without knowing why. They didn't linger long. No one picnicked. No one laughed. They stood, breathed, and left quieter than they arrived. As if something asked them to. Then the dreams began. Not nightmares. Memories that didn't belong to the dreamers. A college student in Ohio woke, sobbing, hands aching as if he'd worked a blade all night. A woman in Georgia dreamed of counting hogs under a moon she had never seen, whispering apologies to animals that would not meet her eyes. A child in Kentucky drew the same building over and over, a small smokehouse, alone, always empty. None of them had read Margaret's manuscript. None of them had been told. The echo was not seeking witnesses. It was dispersing weight. Psychologists called it shared historical trauma. Neurologists blamed pattern-seeking brains. Sociologists wrote papers no one outside their field read. But elders in certain families, families whose wealth had thinned quietly over generations, recognized the feeling immediately. The debt has stopped accruing, they said. Now it's being remembered. In a private archive, 50 years to the day after Margaret sealed the ledger, a clerk noticed something wrong. The box was lighter. The seal was intact, the locks unbroken, yet inside, entire sections had faded, not erased, not burned, but gently lifted from the page, as if the ink itself had decided it was finished speaking. Only one entry remained untouched. Isaac's, but even that had changed. Beneath his name, a new line had appeared in handwriting no analyst could match, pressed deep enough to scar the paper. Not a warning, a lesson. Elsewhere, cruelty continued, as it always does, but something subtle shifted. Systems hesitated. Whistleblowers were believed more often. Records surfaced faster. Silence no longer protected like it used to. It wasn't justice. It was friction. Every act of harm now seemed to require more effort, more people willing to look away. And fewer were willing to do it. The echo did not punish. It interfered. At the old land, a storm came one evening without forecast. Thunder rolled low and long, shaking the trees. Rain fell straight down, heavy but calm. At the center of the clearing, the smokehouse finally collapsed, not violently, but inward, wood folding into itself like a man kneeling. When the storm passed, nothing remained but soil, dark and rich. By morning, wildflowers had begun to grow. People still argue about what Isaac was. A spirit, a symbol, a curse, a conscience. They miss the point. He was an answer to a question history refused to ask for too long. What happens when pain is recorded instead of ignored? The answer was never blood. It was balance. Sometimes, when the world tilts too far again, someone will pause for no clear reason. They will choose not to hurt when it would be easy. They will document instead of destroy. They will remember instead of erase. They will not know why. And somewhere beneath their feet, the land will remain still. Listening. Finished. That was the belief. That balance, once achieved, sealed itself. That memory, once honored, no longer needed a keeper. For a while, that seemed true. The land stayed quiet. The dreams thinned. The echo softened into something like sleep. Then the renovations began. It started miles away, far enough that no one thought to connect it. A private company purchased farmland near the old boundary, new ownership, new zoning, new language. They didn't touch the protected land. Not officially, but they drilled deep wells. They rerouted water. They scraped soil that had once fed into the same underground veins. The ground does not understand paperwork. It understands pressure. The first sign was the hogs. Not sickness, not violence, refusal. Entire industrial farms reported animals that would not move toward feeding stations. They stood shoulder to shoulder, blocking gates, breathing hard, eyes fixed on nothing. No amount of prodding worked. When forced, the hogs collapsed, alive, hearts racing, bodies refusing command. Veterinarians found nothing wrong. Old farmers muttered words they hadn't used in decades. Something's being pushed. In the nearby town, construction workers complained of smells that came and went: iron, smoke, wet wood. One man quit after claiming he heard someone counting under the noise of the machines. Not numbers, he said. Names. They laughed at him. They always do first. A graduate student named Eli Turner noticed the pattern. He wasn't looking for it. He was studying land use conflict, writing a dull thesis about zoning law. But his maps kept overlapping in uncomfortable ways. Old plantation borders, modern industrial sites, environmental damage clustering where human cruelty once concentrated. History repeating, not in acts, but in shape. Eli found Margaret Hale's manuscript in an archive footnote, partially redacted, referenced but never cited. He read what remained in one sitting, heart pounding, palms sweating, not with fear, but recognition. This isn't over, he whispered to an empty library. The lights flickered. That night, Eli dreamed of a ledger reopening itself. Pages did not turn. They waited. A presence stood beside him, not Isaac, not fully. Something thinner, fainter, like an outline left after a man steps away. You wrote it down, Eli said. Yes, the echo replied, not in words, but in understanding. They're hurting the land again. A pause. Unintentionally, Eli added, desperate. The ledger did not care about intent. The next morning, Eli drove to the boundary of the protected land. Survey stakes marked the nearby fields. Machines idled. Men laughed, drank coffee, waited for clearance. None of them looked cruel. None of them looked guilty. That was the problem. Eli stepped into the soil and felt it immediately, a tension underfoot, like breath held too long. He knelt and pressed his hand to the ground. I'm listening, he said. Far below, something shifted. Not awakening, reorienting. Across the region, small things went wrong. Data vanished from servers related to the development. Permits were delayed without explanation. Financial backers withdrew, citing unease. No accidents, no deaths, just obstruction. Quiet, relentless, effective. The company folded within 6 months. Executives blamed the market. The land did not correct them. Eli added an appendix to his thesis. It was never approved, but it circulated anyway, not as a warning, not as myth, as a principle. When harm is layered deeply enough into a place, pressure alone can wake what memory put to rest. Justice does not always return with a face. Sometimes it returns as resistance. Years later, visitors to the old land noticed something new. Not carvings, not words, just a sensation, subtle, unmistakable, that the ground itself leaned away from certain footsteps and welcomed others. Those who came to exploit felt tired quickly, distracted, uncertain. Those who came to listen stayed longer than intended. No one ever saw Isaac again. They didn't need to. The ledger had learned to stand on its own. Eli Turner never called what followed a movement. He refused interviews, declined panels, ignored invitations that tried to turn his appendix into a slogan. He understood something most people didn't. Once named, resistance becomes targetable. Once branded, it can be sold. So he let it spread unnamed. The principle appeared in strange places. A dam project stalled for years because soil tests kept contradicting themselves. A shipping hub failed environmental review after anonymous data surfaced, accurate, devastating, impossible to trace. Corporate archives leaked records no hacker claimed responsibility for, exposing harm done carefully enough to have once seemed invisible. No manifesto connected these events. But the shape was familiar. Pressure met memory. Memory produced friction. Friction stopped harm. People began to feel it before they understood it. Executives described an unshakable hesitation before signing certain papers. Engineers scrapped designs that felt wrong, even when profitable. Lawyers woke from dreams of ledgers they couldn't close, balances they couldn't make disappear. None of this was supernatural. That was the unsettling part. It felt ethical. Historians noticed something else. Sites once known for brutality, plantations, camps, factories built on exploitation, began to resist redevelopment at a statistical rate too high to ignore. Costs ballooned. Investors backed out. Accidents narrowly avoided piled up like warnings no one could quite read. Meanwhile, projects that acknowledged the past, memorialized it honestly, returned land, compensated descendants, proceeded smoothly. As if the ground itself preferred honesty. In a closed symposium, one scholar said what others wouldn't. History is acting like an immune system. The room went quiet, because immune systems do not negotiate. Eli returned to the old land one final time, years after the smokehouse fell. Wildflowers had spread far beyond the original clearing now, thick and unbroken. He walked until he felt the familiar easing in his chest, the sensation of standing where something had finished its work. "I think it's everywhere now," he said aloud. No voice answered, but the wind moved through the grass in a way that felt like agreement. That night, far from Kentucky, a child asked their grandmother a question that stopped her cold. "Why do we write things down?" the child asked, "even when they hurt?" The grandmother thought of names never spoken, stories swallowed to survive. "So they don't come back angry," she said slowly. "So they come back wise." In an archive scheduled for digitization, an old box split at the seam. Inside was a single page that hadn't been catalogued, hadn't been requested, hadn't been missed. No letterhead, no signature, just one sentence, written in a careful hand. "Justice does not need a butcher once the world learns to keep its own books." The archivist logged it as anonymous. But before filing it away, they hesitated, just a moment longer than necessary, then scanned it twice. To be safe. Across the land, no hogs screamed. No men vanished, but deals failed. Silence broke, records surfaced, and everywhere, quietly, the same truth took hold. Some stories don't end, they decentralize. Not because blood had settled, not because the smokehouse stood, and certainly not because anyone had seen Isaac again. It was complete because the story had learned to live without him. Decades passed. The old land became forest. Children played at the edges, stepping lightly where adults avoided. Soil softened, water returned to creeks. Hogs no longer refused to feed, though farmers in neighboring counties noticed subtle hesitations in their movements, tiny pauses, almost imperceptible, as if the animals remembered something long buried. Margaret Hale's manuscript, sealed for 50 years, had finally been opened by scholars. They did not find monsters or ghosts. They found patterns, connections, names once hidden, and the weight of countless acts of cruelty measured and recorded. The ledger had become a guide, not to vengeance, but to awareness. Eli Turner, now an old man, walked through the ruins one last time. The clearing was wide and empty. The wind carried nothing but the rustle of leaves. He knelt where the smokehouse had stood. Fingers brushed the earth. "You're done," he whispered. And for the first time in 2 centuries, the land did not respond. It was still, resting. Stories of Isaac, the butcher, persisted in whispers. In books, in lectures, in dreams. But he was no longer needed to act. The ledger, human memory, careful record, truth preserved, had taken his place. The justice he once embodied had diffused into the world itself. Somewhere, faint and untouchable, his presence lingered, but it was calm, almost invisible. He was a shadow in memory, a lesson rather than a threat. Generations learned slowly. They learned that cruelty cannot be erased. It can only be recorded, remembered, and accounted for. They learned that silence is not safety. They learned that when injustice is acknowledged, the world resists, even when no hand wields a blade. And the land remained, patient, watching. The ledger, once a tool of vengeance, became a tool of wisdom. And the butcher, finally, was at rest.